All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice question series where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're turning, welcome back. Please subscribe. We really appreciate it. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A casino is buying new machines that deal cards automatically for them. The speed of the machine is very important to keep players involved and playing longer. The person responsible for buying the machines is most concerned with the time in between each card that is dealt. Relative to measurement, what does this concern most resemble? This is a good example of how you should be thinking about these behavior analytic terms that you're learning. We are dealing with human behavior, but not every question on the exam might be immediately about a clinical scenario or a client scenario. For example, this case, it is a measurement question, but we're talking about the time between cards that are dealt. So you have to think about, okay, what measurement would I use? One, for time in between something, and two, time in between the same thing. So let's think about that. A, frequency. Would frequency measure time in between cards that are dealt? So card one to card two. No, frequency is going to measure how many cards, right? Frequency is just a count. Frequency is not measuring time in between. What about B, duration? When we think about duration, we're looking at the time of a single response, not time in between responses, but the time it takes to complete a response. So time in between cards is not going to be duration. What about latency? When we think about latency, we're thinking time between the SD and the first response. With this question, we're looking at response to response or card to card. So latency might be when you turn the machine on and it deals its first card. That could be the latency. But if you're worried about the time in between each card, so response to response, now we're dealing with D into response time. So this is a really good question that isn't that difficult, but it's really going to test your understanding, not just your memorization, but your understanding of our measurement systems. Using a fixed ratio schedule that provided reinforcement every 2 correct responses, a client was able to learn to communicate when they were hungry without engaging in nail biting. When the schedule was changed to a variable ratio 7, the client stopped communicating as well and started to engage in nail biting again at lower rates. What should be done in this situation? Let's think about our situation. What do we know so far? You should always start there. What do we know? What is the question asking? What do we know? We know we're using an FR2 for reinforcement. It's a very thick schedule, a lot of reinforcement for not a lot of response effort. And the client was learning to communicate without nail biting, so it was effective. We then went to a schedule that was a variable ratio 7. That's a much thinner schedule compared to the FR2, meaning it's going to take a lot more to get reinforcement on top of the fact it's a variable schedule. So reinforcement is a lot less predictable. Now think about what is something that occurs if we go from a very thick reinforcement schedule and we thin it too quickly. Well, a lot of times we have what we call ratio strain, where the schedule was changed too rapidly. And so what tends to happen is the client stops responding or the behaviors start to come back, which is what has happened here. So if that is the case, what should we do? A, switch the reinforcement schedule to a continuous schedule. Possibly, but we were already at an FR2. Going to a continuous schedule would mean we're going to an FR1. And so we're all the way back at the beginning, which doesn't seem necessary considering we were effective even at an FR2. So A seems to be overkill. B, start punishing the nail biting behavior on an intermittent schedule. We don't need to introduce punishment. Again, we've had an effective plan. It looks like we've just faded the reinforcement too quickly. So instead of introducing punishment, what can we do? Well, we can see thicken the schedule back and thin the schedule more slowly. So just don't thin it as quickly. You had something effective. Let's just go a little slower on how much reinforcement we are removing or how much response effort we are requiring. And then D, a new behavior should be targeted for change. Well, we can't move on yet, right? Because the old behavior is coming back. The behavior we want to see, the communication, isn't going as well. So we have to make an adjustment and focus on the issue at hand. And the best way to do that, especially when dealing with ratio strain, I should say, is thicken the schedule back and then thin that schedule more slowly. You implement an extinction procedure designed by your supervisor for nearly 2 months. At first, the behavior started to increase, but then it plateaued and decreased. Now the behavior is finally extinguished. At this point in the procedure, what should you be prepared for that could likely occur? Question wants to know, what do we do now? What are we thinking given the situation? What are we preparing for? We know we've done extinction, right? And extinction was effective. The behavior increased, it plateaued, now it's gone. Our extinction procedure was effective. What can possibly happen once extinction is over? What are we expecting to happen? A, an extinction burst. Well, the extinction burst already happened. We implemented extinction. The behavior initially increased and then decreased. So the extinction burst has already taken place. B, punishment-induced aggression. Well, we're not using punishment, right? Extinction and punishment aren't the same thing. Don't confuse those two or associate those two. Punishment and extinction, the only thing they have in common is they decrease behavior. C, spontaneous recovery. Yes, we expect possibly that spontaneous recovery can occur, which means the behavior might reappear suddenly. So if we're thinking of an order of operations for extinction, we might go extinction to an extinction burst, to the behavior being extinguished, then to spontaneous recovery, which is a sudden reemergence of the extinguished behavior. We can prepare for it, we can plan for it. And then D, regression. Be careful with that word regression, right? It's not a term we need to define and learn. In practice, you'll probably hear the word regression quite a bit, but for your exam, when we need to be behavior analytic in nature and use behavior analytic terms, regression should not be included. What we're going to expect now that the behavior is extinguished is possibly spontaneous recovery. Luke played in the grass all day yesterday and came home covered in bug bites. He was itching all over his body, so he put some anti-itch cream on his bites. The itching went away and Luke stopped itching his body, but applied more anti-itch cream later. What changed Luke's behavior? So we're looking at Luke's behavior. What do we know about Luke? We know Luke was covered in bug bites and he was itching. What did he do when he was itching? He put anti-itch cream on the bites. What was the consequence? The itching went away, and now Luke applies more anti-itch cream. So Luke's behavior changed how? Well, it increased. Luke was itching, and he put the anti-itch cream on. The consequence was the itching went away, which led to more anti-itch cream in the future. So, since it increased, we're looking at reinforcement. Now we have to ask ourselves, was the consequence positive or negative? Was something added? Was something taken away? Well, pretty clearly, when he put the anti-itch cream on his bites, it removed the itching. So we're looking at negative reinforcement. So A, positive reinforcement. Yes, Luke's behavior was reinforced, but not positively. It was negatively reinforced. The consequence was the removal of something, which makes it negative. And then, of course, we have C and D, positive and negative punishment. Punishment reduces behavior. Since Luke engaged in the same response in the future, we know the behavior was not punished. So what changed Luke's behavior is going to be B, negative reinforcement. Ms. Resner is helping a child learn to recognize and name basic shapes. During each session, Ms. Resner presents a single shape card, circle, square, or triangle, and asks the child, what shape is this? The child is reinforced for correctly naming the shape presented. This procedure exemplifies what of the following concepts? So let's think about this. It's a concept question, and we're trying to identify what is this procedure demonstrating? What concept? What do we know? We know Ms. Resner is helping child the child learn and recognize shapes. She's presenting each shape card and asking, what shape is this? And then the child is reinforced for correctly naming the shape presented. So if we were trying to teach a child to learn the difference between stimuli, like circle, square, and triangle, what are we trying to teach? Well, we're trying to teach stimulus discrimination, or A, discrimination. Don't overthink a question like this. It's very simple. Miss Resner is trying to teach the child to tell the difference between circle, square, and triangle. They're discriminating between these stimuli. What is differentiation? Well, differentiation has to do with responses. So if the child was learning to say the shape versus pointing at the shape, now we're dealing with responses. Now we're dealing with response differentiation. Well, that's not what we're working with here. We're working with the stimuli and discriminating between the stimuli. Is Miss Resner fading anything at this point? Not that we can tell. We're not talking about stimulus fading, and it doesn't appear that there are prompts involved. It looks like Miss Resner is teaching very simple discrimination. Here's a shape card. Name that shape. Discriminate between other shapes you may know. So this procedure exemplifies stimulus discrimination, or A, discrimination. Thanks for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate it. When you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. We'll see you soon.